Welcome to the Explainer. Step into the quiet with me for just a second. Imagine it's midnight, the house is completely still, and you've just closed the cover of a book you had been anticipating for weeks. You're sitting there in the silence, processing what you just read, and you realize something profound has gone wrong. Today, we're exploring the anatomy of a literary heartbreak by looking at Demelza Carlton's Fall, guided by a really compelling review from creator Guinevere Atlas, who perfectly captures this exact phenomenon. I wanted to give this book 4 stars. It got 2. Let that stark contrast just sit heavily in the air for a second. This is the central emotional gap that Guinevere introduces right at the very start of her critique. And honestly, it's the most fascinating thing about this entire reading experience. We're not talking about a book that was fundamentally terrible from page 1. No, we're talking about a book that had every single piece of the puzzle right there on the table, just waiting to be put together. That gap between the 2 stars it ultimately got and the 4 stars the reader desperately wanted to give it is this massive, quiet canyon of missed potential. Section 1. A perfect romantasy setup. Honoring the magic. Okay, let's dive right into this, because before we can break down what went wrong, we absolutely have to honor what went right. This is on paper perfection. We've got a young fairy godmother named Zoraida who is literally out here fighting a dragon to save her runaway godson. When she loses that battle, she desperately portals out, miscalculates, and drops straight into a freezing magical Christmas blizzard in the middle of nowhere. Plus, it's framed as a Scheherazade retelling, which is a narrative structure that should absolutely wreck a reader emotionally. And we know it builds toward a sweet, honorable proposal. Fairy tale retellings with a Christmas atmosphere and a medieval setting, I mean, for a lot of Romantasy readers, that is literally their love language. It's a genuinely delicious setup. And it delivers one of the most adorable setups imaginable, the bear fur meet cute. Baron Hans finds Zoraida in this freezing wasteland and takes her in. But because he's wearing all this heavy bear fur and skin to survive the elements, Zoraida initially mistakes him for an actual bear. It is so charming. It's genuinely sweet. And their subsequent moments hiding out at the tavern have this real cozy magic to them. Hans himself is simple, honorable, and warm. You really can't help but like the guy. The bones are undeniably there, and it is a pure joy to read those early moments. Section 2. The Craft Clinic, Proximity versus Connection. All right, here is where we need to lower the lights a bit. Let's step back from that cozy tavern fire and enter the craft clinic, because we have to transition from reading as fans to reading as mechanics and have a totally honest, objective conversation about how romance actually functions on the page. And this brilliantly illustrates the core issue at play in Fall. On one side, we have proximity, putting 2 strangers together in a freezing blizzard so they have to survive until Christmas morning. That's a great plot device for sure. But on the other side, we have connection. The characters taking the necessary time to truly see each other, to understand each other's inner worlds. A blizzard can force proximity, but it absolutely cannot force connection. Because that emotional groundwork wasn't laid, when Hans finally proposes at the end of the story, it doesn't land as a heartbeat. It just lands as a structural plot point. Which brings us to a really crucial concept: unearned chemistry. Cute moments, like our adorable bear fur meet cute, are not the same thing as earned chemistry. Guinevere points out that Fall is incredibly short. It's essentially a single-sitting read, clocking in at just a 42-minute audiobook runtime. It simply doesn't have the time, or maybe doesn't take the time, to close that emotional gap between the characters. The proposal is meant to be sweet, and the author clearly meant every word of it, but as a reader, you kind of just feel nothing. And not because the prose is bad, but because you haven't been given the time to feel that this love is inevitable. Section 3. The Secret of Pacing, the Before Gloria Regali parallel. So how do you actually earn that chemistry? Guinevere Atlas introduces a fascinating parallel from her own writing, a 16th century Italian gothic romantasy titled Before Gloria Regali. Now, we won't spoil its dark, mysterious intrigue, but there's a character in it, James, who perfectly demonstrates what we call a red herring romance. He isn't the protagonist's forever love, but unlike a cheap plot device, a true red herring romance is written with intense, deliberate intention. You have to give the relationship time. You have to build genuine emotional weight. Why? So that when it ultimately ends, the reader actually grieves the loss. A romance, even a doomed one, needs time to do actual emotional work. Let's move to how this builds, because the tragic arc of James maps this out perfectly. Moment 1. He dances with the protagonist, Rosette, in wild grass. Moment 2. They play poker together. Moment 3. They travel together. He listens to her explain exactly why she's too academic, too restless to be what he needs, and he loves her anyway. Moment 4, he takes her as far as he can, sets her up as a governess in Ireland, and finally lets her go. Every single one of these scenes is doing heavy emotional work. They aren't just being cute, they're building something real. So when he releases her, you feel the weight of a genuine love that just wasn't right. That is earned emotion. Fall desperately needed scenes that weren't just charming, but were doing this exact kind of heavy lifting. Section 4, the final verdict, a shared disappointment. Which pulls us out of our objective craft lesson and right back into the lingering, quiet melancholy of the actual review. 2 out of 5 stars. As Guinevere notes, the bones were there, the atmosphere was there, the characters had immense potential. But a 42-minute runtime is not an excuse for an unearned romance. It's a challenge to write one anyway. And unfortunately, this novella didn't quite meet that challenge. If you just want a sweet, clean fairy tale and you don't mind skipping the emotional groundwork, the bear fur meet cute alone might be worth it for you. But if you need to feel a romance before you believe it, this rating stands. Holding 2 stars and wishing you were holding 4, that is the exact, specific kind of literary disappointment we're talking about today. It's a quiet heartbreak, the kind that comes from a book that had absolutely everything it needed and just didn't slow down enough to use it. So, what about you? Have you ever picked up a book that had literally everything going for it on paper? The perfect tropes, the perfect aesthetic, the perfect setup, but still left you quietly heartbroken because it just didn't do the emotional work? Drop your experiences in the comments. Honestly, sharing these literary disappointments is how we create stronger connections within the reading community. We all bond over the potential of what could have been. If you found this breakdown of narrative tropes and writing mechanics insightful, make sure to go check out and subscribe to Romantasy and Routine. It is an amazing space for Gen Z, neurodivergent, booktube, and authortube case studies. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Until next time, keep reading critically, especially when you find yourself holding a 2-star book but wishing you were holding 4.